After I graduated, I moved away to Annapolis for a couple years. And there was recycling over in Annapolis, and we became sort of aware of it. Um, uh, and then we moved back, and I moved back into Chestertown, and there's this environmental group called Kent Conservation, which called itself an environmental watchdog organization. And it had about 30 people on the board, maybe 20 or 30. And they had formed to stop sort of the Arundel Corporation putting in a great big gravel pit in the middle of the county. And that's how they got formed. That was before my time. Um, but there were two members there who started recycling in '72, and they convinced the county put up 8 little collection stations, 55-gallon drums. It was before plastics recycling, and they were all around. There was one in Chestertown, right by the college's health building, right out there on Washington Avenue. A little shed, and there were some sheds like the different towns and stuff. And so I knew that was happening, and worked with that. But so I was in the organization for a couple of years, and like if you're around and you show up in the meetings, eventually you're going to be president, and that's it. So I was sort of like president, and right after I was president, um, a Kent County commissioner invited an incinerator company that was set up in Baltimore to come over and uh, do trash. Set up a place here that burned 1 million people's trash a day, and had a great deal. They're going to give the county free trash service, trash disposal or whatever, incineration, and they were going to pay for every ton of trash that came in from out of county, which would have been a lot, about $1,500 a day. And so we looked into it, and we were worried about the recycling program because it'd just be encouraging all this stuff to get burnt. And at the time, the county had uh, a tractor trailer that wasn't roadworthy, but it could store paper. And all the paper got stacked up in there. And then when it got full or close to full, we contacted Garden State Paper, and they sent a trailer and backed it right up to it. And then we set up these roller conveyors and moved the newspaper out, all volunteers. I was the youngest person. I was about 40, but there were lots of people who were 60 and 70 doing it. And we moved 20 tons of newspaper in a few hours. And that was like, we did that about every 3 months, every quarter. And we had a little leeway, say like today's really hot, we can't do that, we just do it. And but then when the incinerator thing came along, we wanted to encourage recycling. And what I did, first thing I did is I wanted to see what it was like. And I had a trailer, a little 8-foot trailer hooked up to a Volkswagen bus I was driving at the time. And I convinced 3 towns to compete to see who could recycle the most newspaper per capita, and they would get a tree. We gave them a tree, and they, we got that going. And what happened is that Kent County's recycling was like a 1%, and it tripled and went to 3%, which meant that newspaper trailer had to be emptied every month. And that's when I found, I experienced picking up newspaper, at the curb to see what that was like. And I saw volunteers we were all complaining. We got to do this every month, and we're doing it for the county. We're keeping this stuff out of the county. And so I felt like you need to be paid to do this stuff, especially when it gets serious. 3%, it's no big deal. We want to get up to a third or whatever. And so that's when I started Infinity Recycling. And it was me and Tom Hopkins. I don't know if you remember him, but he was another Washington College graduate. We sort of worked together and hired a couple of people and expanded, and we got glass. And started looking into markets and what we could do. I found a broker that would take everything just as long as it's all separated as it's put in the trailer. And back then, we had to hire a trucker to move the trailer and all that. But, just learning about the markets and the fluctuation. We talked about newspaper, how it went down to a negative value, and recycling was sort of catching on, and newspapers were big. And then that's all came back as mills expanded, thinking, okay, this is serious. And so that's what happened, and that's how it started. Yeah, I mean, I tried to figure out how to do it, and here's the crux of the whole thing came down to what I read right in the beginning as I was studying. They said recycling is a high volume, low margin business, and the problem is high volume. There's not high volume around here. I have to drive way too far. Like I go into a town, go into a city and say, in 2 blocks, there are more people than the whole county. And like I always say, you fill up a stadium to watch the birds, and you've got like 2 Kent counties sitting there. And, so that just didn't work. And then with the markets fluctuating so much, it still does. A lot of people think that you just make money. Recycling will pay for itself. Well, it never has. And, and I might have thought along those lines in the beginning myself, even though I read differently, but I thought it would still work. But, as I mentioned earlier, like glass at that time was worth $75 a ton. That was every color, was just as long as it's separate. And glass is really heavy, so it doesn't take long to do 75, to get a ton. Usually a tractor trailer will hold 20 tons, which is usually 40 of these great big boxes. But for when we did glass, we could only put 10 boxes in, and that would be our 20 tons. And we had to, I had to hire a driver, had to go to Toronto, Virginia to sell it. So that was a big expense, it's like $400 or $450 a time. But still, we were making money there, and we were charging bars to do the service. So that the original concept was the service charge would pay for our guys to go get it. And then the rest of the sorting, the processing, and shipping would all be paid by the value of the material. And that worked for a few years, but then, it just, it fell apart. Plastics came on, and that was not much. It's very light, but it still takes an awful lot of work to bale it up, to get it ready for market, and you didn't get paid very much. The first time I said, well, we were working with the towns, and then they were offered free by the county, and the county did it all for free, and then there was a budget crunch for the county, and the first thing they did is they cut out like 95% of their recycling. I think they only recycle for the schools and a couple other county governmental endeavors and buildings. And so we lost there, and then we came back with Chestertown, and the deal was $5 a household per month for the weekly service, which puts, we offered it 2 ways. We could do for the whole town at a flat rate, or we could do $5. And so, like, if you do the whole town, then it's the town's responsibility to do the education, promotion, and get the participation. If you do it $5 a household, that looks, it naturally puts the onus on me to do that, and which I did. And then there was a budget crunch for the town, and which happened, unfortunately, right after I rode my bicycle around the whole town, put door hangers out, and we increased our participation quite a bit. We were looking forward to a bigger check from Chestertown, and then they had the budget crunch, and they felt like we have to cut out recycling. And there was a town meeting, and obviously a lot of people didn't want it to stop, but I was told, by the mayor, we got to stop because it's too expensive. And I said, okay, well, I'll drop our rate to a certain number. And it was less than, we were getting like we were getting close to $6,000 or something like that, or I think it was well above that. But we dropped it down to a flat rate of $5,200, and I think, well, that's the way it was. Just this, thinking that, okay, they'll get over the budget and we'll get raises on and on. And the raises didn't come, and I really started begging for them. And we got a few, but it never went up very much.